Quae Nocent Docent is a 16-line, 3-stanza poem that was written by the poet Samuel Taylor Coleridge, often abbreviated to STC, when he was only 17 years old. Translates from Latin to English as "what hurts teaches" or "what harms teaches," whichever you prefer. As previously stated, Latin is an extremely open-ended language. The poem was most likely written at Christ's Hospital, Coleridge's school, where he spent most of his youth. As Coleridge's father died when Coleridge was only 10, it's not like there was a happy home to return to if he wanted to. His years there were painful, his spirit isolated, and his thoughts filled with sageful, if depressed, providence. Background. There are actually some analyses online of this poem, and I will be using some analyses already posted as references to reinforce my ideas. For us said in other essays, a small poem with one meaning will only have one meaning, and to retard the further conscious development of that lesson in hopes of creating a new message to take home, to make oneself seem more intelligent. A summary of the poem. So Quae Nocent Docent is a poem about a speaker filled with Coleridge's, the poet's, thoughts of what he sees as wasted time. The speaker reflects on their wasted youthful days, passed in fun and joyous celebration over intense intellectually driven work. The speaker wishes that his wasted years could be returned to him in order to replace that wasted time with intellectual work or academic progress. At the end of the poem, the speaker realizes that he cannot change the past, but he can use the idea of that wasted time to inspire himself to work harder on his current task. In order to make up the lost time, the poet feels that he has spent celebrating joy rather than developing himself. The speaker feels that he can use his time more wisely with each passing day with this reflection. So, the poem itself. O mihi praetoritos referatsi Jupiteranos. Oh, might my ill-past hours return again. No more, as then, should sloth around me throw her soul enslaving leaden chain. No more the precious time would I employ in giddy revels or thoughtless joy, a present joy producing future woe. But o'er the midnight lamp I'd love to pore, I'd seek with care fair learning's depths to sound, and gather scientific lore. Or to mature the embryo thoughts inclined, that half conceived lay struggling in my mind, the cloisterer's solitary gloom I'd round. 'Tis vain to wish, for time has taken his flight, for follies past becease the fruitless tears. Let follies past to future care incite. Averse maturer judgments to obey, youth owns, with pleasure owns, the passions sway. But sage experience only comes with years. Detailed analysis. The analysis will follow both the sentence structure in order to develop each sentence by following the punctuation, as well as the stanza structure in order to develop the idea of each stanza and therefore the entire poem. The subtitle will not count as a line of the poem, but as a secondary title for the poem. To begin the analysis, we will start with the subtitle in lines 1 to 3 of the first stanza. First and foremost, the subtitle translates to, "If only Jupiter would restore me those bygone years." Jupiter was the king of gods in Roman mythology, which along with Greek, Coleridge had shown interest in both of them. The Romans had a huge effect on British and English culture that cannot be understated. As well, this is a wonderful way to begin and subtitle the poem because it almost immediately makes one realize what the poem will be about: wasted or lost time. Line 1 translates to, "A cry of any number of emotions, most likely a form of depressed anger or grief. Oh, if only, might, my poorly spent time and wasted hours of childhood youth, ill-past hours, could arise and come back, return again. O was an explanation or reaction of great popularity in antiquated England. It was an exclamative which can be any range of non-specific emotions, the origin of which can be, and in this case must be, interpreted by the feeling or sentiment of the remaining sentence. O was also used as a reaction for shock or surprise. Lines 2 and 3. These lines are meant to be read together as one sentence carrying on the idea of the last line. These two lines claim, "No longer is what happened in childhood, no more, should laziness, sloth, encompass me with what felt like a weighted chain, around me throw, leaden chain. Sloth, personified as a woman, being my master's name. Laziness was my master in childhood, constantly wrapping and tugging the weight of lazy activity into me, making that sentiment the only one that I feel, soul enslaving, as if she handled a chain made of lead around my neck that weighs me down, leaden chain." Lines 4 to 6. These lines are meant to be read together as the punctuation dictates. These lines have the speaker claiming that I will not waste my life's time, no more the precious time would I employ, in enjoying myself in a lively and noisy way, dancing and drinking, causing me so much joy that I feel like I'm spinning, giddy rebels, or in a joyous activity that has no real point or reason, or produces nothing worthwhile, thoughtless joy. I will not cause any more of my time chasing a happy activity or sentiment, present joy, that will cause me immediate joy in the future, but will cause me, produces, great sorrow or distress, woe, in the future. So that finishes the analysis for stanza 1. Stanza 1 being, quote, "O mihi praetoritos referatsi Jupiteranos." O might my ill-past hours return again, no more as then should sloth around me throw her soul enslaving a leaden chain. No more the precious time would I employ in giddy revels, or in thoughtless joy, a present joy producing future woe. Now I'll begin the analysis of stanza 2. So in stanza 2, the speaker begins to speak about what he would have done with his lost and wasted time if he was to have it given back. The speaker claims in line 7 that he would have loved to work on a worthwhile project. I would have loved poor, until it was so dark that one must light a lamp or candle to see what one would be doing. Over the midnight lamp, the speaker would spend a great amount of time working. The speaker on line 8 says, as well, I would have sought out, I'd seek, with great care and precise thought, care fair, all there is to be learned, learning's depths, and understand it to perfection, to sound, and or see how far down the rabbit hole of knowledge I can venture. This line can be taken one of two ways, or both if you understand the connection. If something is sound to the English, it means that it is perfect and nothing can be done to improve it. An example would be, the weather today at the beach was sound. Think of sound to mean perfect, as the English use the term grand to mean good. Additionally, there is a naval connection here with the terms sound and depth. To sound water is a naval term meaning to test the depths of the water and see how low down the subterrane is. Therefore, the speaker is either saying, I would have tested the depths of knowledge to see how far it and I can go, and/or I would have sought the perfection of what is to be learned. In line 9, the speaker continues the aforementioned idea by saying, in addition to that, and, I would gather and gain worldly scientific knowledge and wisdom, scientific lore. Lore translates to a body of traditions and knowledge on a subject or held by a particular group, typically passed from person to person by word of mouth. That body of traditions would be humanist and earthly scientist thinking. Remember that this poem was written in 1789, when modern science was but theory. The knowledge on the subject held would be passed through book-learned knowledge more so than word of mouth, but the term is applicable for the poem nonetheless. The speaker in line 10 says, or, if I got my wasted time back, I would see the beginnings and formulations, embryo, of my scientific and learned thoughts grow, mature, even as they had a tendency to, inclined. The thought carries on into the next line. In line 11, the previous thought continues. Stay in my mind as nothing more than intrusive thoughts, not followed, lay struggling. I never took those thoughts and made them into something productive. Therefore, if that time was returned, I would employ those thoughts into something useful, half-conceived thoughts. In line 12, the speaker says, but those thoughts turn productive. It's as if I would be walking around a covered walkway, cloister. I would be lonely, solitary, and partially or totally blind with darkness or filled with depression, gloom. Perhaps Coleridge felt that he would have been trapped in thought in such a scenario while trying to make his thoughts productive, and end up coming across like a priest obsessive over the word of God, unable to speak or focus on anything else without making his ultimate itching thoughts the focal point of anything social. The speaker could also be saying, with those thoughts turned productive, it's as if I would have been a lonely priest or monk walking around a dark and lonely covered walkway in a church. I'd walk around the cloister filled with solitary gloom. Additionally, the speaker could be saying, with those thoughts in my mind, it's as if I would have visited the solitary gloom of the local church's cloister, or a covered walkway. There are numerous definitions of the term round, or to round, or a round. One could imply the word to mean walk around, or be around, to round off, to circle around. Could be used to imply the idea of visiting someone, as in come round my way. Could mean one is surrounded by, or even the opposite, that one is surrounding. The objective of this rambling paragraph of mine is to demonstrate the various ways that around or round can be used, as well as the multiple definitions that it can have. The line is up to the reader's interpretation ultimately, but it most likely corresponds with the speaker's feeling that he is surrounded, or would be surrounded, by the solitary gloom his thoughts would present regardless. So that finishes the analysis for stanza 2. Stanza 2 being, but o'er the midnight lamp I'd love to pore, I'd seek with care fair learning's depths to sound, and gather scientific lore. Or to mature the embryo thoughts inclined, that half conceived lay struggling in my mind, the cloister's solitary gloom I'd round. Now I begin the analysis of the third and final stanza. So the speaker, and therefore Coleridge, summarized the lesson this poem contains within its final stanza. Lines 13 to 18. The main point of these lines and this stanza is to make the reader realize that it's pointless to wish and want. One can only learn from their past mistakes or wasted time, and use that knowledge and wisdom that will come to all as they get older to reinforce why one should be working harder and being more productive, over having joyous fun and celebration like one has as a child. So lines 13 to 15 are meant to be read together as the punctuation dictates. In line 13, the speaker says, it would produce no result, vain, to wish for time to return, because time is gone forever, never to return when it decides to leave very quickly, as like a bird suddenly taking his flight. In line 14, the speaker says, don't cry over the foolishness you see as wasted time, or lack of good sense as a child, follies past. Don't cry or yell, as it will produce nothing worth any value for yourself or the world. Beseech the fruitless tears. This idea carries on into the next line. In line 15, the speaker states, let the foolishness or lack of good sense of the past, let follies past, encourage more thought on your actions in the present which would affect your future, to future care and sight. The final part of stanza 3 would be lines 16 to 18, where these lines speak of how a youth, and most definitely Coleridge, most likely views the world, as well as how one can achieve the enlightenment that Coleridge discovered at only 17 years old. In line 16, the speaker says, one may have a strong dislike or opposition, averse, to thinking like an adult, maturer judgments, and following through, to obey, with the discipline involved in attempting to grow yourself as a successful person. In line 17, the speaker states, "Youth and pleasure dictate, own, how one's strong and barely controllable emotions will sway from one thought or idea to the next, passions sway." Finally, in line 18, the speaker ends the poem with a statement of, "The practical contact, observation, undergoing or encountering experience of the aforementioned thought will only come to one with a lot of time alive, comes with years, as a profoundly wise man, sage, filled with profound wisdom." So that ends the analysis of stanza 3, and therefore the poem. Stanza 3 being, "'Tis vain to wish, for time has taken his flight. For follies past becease the fruitless tears, let follies past future care in sight. Averse maturer judgments to obey, youth owns, with pleasure owns, the passions sway, but sage experience only comes with years." So now that the poem has been thoroughly analyzed, and the third stanza has been completed, I think it's time for a revised summary of the poem. So by following the analysis, we can now prove that the speaker, who was most likely Coleridge, did in fact wish to have their childhood years back that they believed were wasted on fun, and instead they wished to spend that time being more productive, following ideas and thoughts to a successful fruition. We can also prove that Coleridge felt that these thoughts would depress him very greatly as a boy, as the thoughts do as an almost man, being 17. As well, we can also prove Coleridge's message from the poem, that message being, don't wish for a redo, use that wasted time you wish to return to as fuel to accomplish your goals as an adult. I wish to thank you all very much for watching and listening. I hope you all enjoyed the audio portion of the essay as well as the paintings that I have included as a sort of visual reference to the points being discussed in the poem. As always, stay poetic and stay powerful.